Welcome to the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Join us each week as we sit down with the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management and author of Your Fiscal Physical, Ryan Nelson. Tune in to gain valuable insights and practical tips as we simplify complex financial concepts into digestible lessons. From budgeting to retirement planning, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering financial literacy.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Fiscal Physical Podcast. My name is Aaron. I am joined, as always, by Ryan Nelson, the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management. Ryan, how are you on this beautiful day?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Not too bad. I'm enjoying life, enjoying learning, getting fiscally fit, if you will, because God knows I'm not getting physically fit, so got to have one piece of fitness in there. But I just wanted to say thanks to all the listeners out there, and appreciate you guys joining us. Hopefully you'll find this today's topic, relatable. I assume that you will. But Ryan, today we're going to talk about inflation. What are your thoughts on inflation, just in general?
Yeah, I don't know that I have too many thoughts. What are your thoughts?
All right, that's the end of the podcast. Yeah. Stay the course. No, I mean, just the topic of inflation, I would say that it's something that I've heard about, I learned about in like history books, like after like world wars and stuff. You see like inflation of currency, but honestly, up until I guess after COVID, after 2021, 2022, we started hearing that word get thrown around a lot and, on the news, inflation. So I think there might be a lot of misconceptions or ignorance that are related to inflation. So that's kind of what we're going to tackle today. So I just want to see if you can break it down a little bit for us here, Ryan, with some the important parts of it, what it is, what it isn't, and see where that kind of takes us.
Yeah, what kind of connotation do you have when you hear about inflation? Is this negative, positive, exciting, scary?
Good question. I would say that most of the time with inflation of what I hear is negative connotation. That's kind of what goes around with it. I'm like, oh my gosh, like inflation, like the dollar doesn't go as far. Things are more expensive. Things aren't matching up. The Fed's trying to get this under control. Like I would say that those are what you hear about. Now, whether or not that's true, because I feel like you can hear a lot of things, and whether they be accurate or not, I don't know. So, but that's kind of my first thing is I think about negative connotation when it comes to inflation.
Yeah, I got to imagine that's the vast majority of people, and I don't know that it really is negative or positive per se. But so inflation, sort of the technical definition of inflation, is the tendency for goods and services to increase in price over time. So the cost for goods and services increasing over time. And what's interesting is, so let's actually take a quick step back. But so the Bureau of Labor Statistics measures a metric, and they call that the Consumer Price Index. So when most people talk about inflation, it's like, what is it? It's like, oh, I go to the store and I pay more for groceries. Like, okay, that's some effects of, there's some inflationary effects there, but, how do we measure it, or is there any more sort of definitiveness around it? And so really this CPI, so Consumer Price Index, measured by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is really sort of the one of the go-to metrics for gauging if inflation is going up, if it's going down, or just what it's doing. And so you can kind of think of this as the average price for everyday goods. It includes things like food, fuel, energy, housing, cars, things like that. And then you can compare how these goods cost today versus, say, how they cost a year ago, right? And so now when you take this kind of pool of things, including the food, the cars, right, the housing, and then if it costs more today than it did 12 months ago, okay, that means everything's getting more expensive. Inflation is going up, right? And so that's on the surface level. I think that's what inflation really is, or when people are talking about inflation, that's what they are referring to. Mm-hmm. One thing that I think is a little bit interesting is, so the Federal Reserve has some responsibility for some target inflation rates. And what they target is not a 0% inflation. Mm-hmm. They actually target a 2% inflation. So I think you could almost take from that the Federal Reserve believes that some inflation is actually positive, right? 2% being better than 1%, being better than 0%. but also maybe 2% being better than 3% or 4% or 5%. So it's an interesting sort of metric. I think the 2% number is probably a bit arbitrary, but I think what you might be able to take from that is that actually some amount of inflation is actually healthy for a growing economy. And I don't know that you would want just zero or negative inflation, nor do I think you'd probably want like 20 or 30% inflation, so super high inflations, right? But again, to kind of keep in your back of your mind, the Federal Reserve, they claim to target a 2% inflation rate. So as you're thinking or you hear about what current inflation rate is, you can kind of compare it to maybe that 2% rate.
Yeah, that's a good point to be able to kind of, that is like a baseline, not saying that it's good, bad specifically, but that's like what it seems to be targeted overall. So you see like, 6% inflation. You're like, well, that's higher than 2%. That might not be the best. Like,
yeah. So, and what we find is there's sort of this, this compounding effect that happens, right? And it almost this like, snowball effect or the spiral that happens where, so I'll just kind of walk you through the process. And this is kind of how inflation can take hold. But so businesses will ask for a higher price if it costs them more to produce an item, right? So let's say we have some inflation, it costs more. So all the costs and services cost more. So now a business, if I'm producing some object, right? What I'm trying to sell, a widget, and now it costs me more to source the pieces for the widget and the services for the widget, then I'm going to want to sell this for more, right? So I can maintain my profit margin. So then what happens is as the prices go up, the workers sort of demand higher wages. So now I'm having to pay my employees more. And then as wages go up, it costs more for the businesses to produce the items. And then it's kind of this reoccurring cycle. So as it costs more to produce the items, the prices go up, right? And it's kind of this like self-fulfilling prophecy where they just keep going up, right? And so a lot of times when you hear this like on the news or something, there's like oftentimes like some sort of like sense of panic probably that may be unfounded, but the worry would be that it could almost spiral out of control, right? And it feeds on itself to some degree. And so you don't want inflation to get too high because it can kind of compound on itself. So trying to maintain it around that 2-ish% seems to be, again, according to the Fed, a good target number there.
Is that 2% year over year, or I don't know if they measure it like monthly. So, I've seen graphs for like monthly inflation and like these certain things.
Yeah, so they measure inflation, that CPI number I was talking about, the consumer price index. They measure that more frequently. So you could measure, usually they have a report every month, so you could see, what January or February or March or April's increase was over the last month. But really what you want to, typically when we're talking about percentages, we're talking about the annual percentage. So it would be what happened over the last year. Like if you really get into weeds, what people will look at is more kind of fine-tooth comb, is like they'll try to start figuring out like, okay, so if inflation's at 6%, great, that's one piece of valuable information, but is it at 6% and heading upwards, or is it at 6% and heading downwards, right? So you can look at sort of the monthly numbers and start to get a better feel for sort of where it's maybe heading in the future. So it really is more of a 12-month number, but looking at it monthly can give you a little bit more context.
Cool. Awesome.
One example or one thing, so like let's take eggs for example. So let's say that eggs, who cares if these numbers are relative? I'll just use nice round numbers to keep them simple. So let's pretend that eggs used to cost $4 a dozen, and some inflationary effects take place, and now eggs cost $10 a dozen, right? I think the general consensus is that it's like, okay, eggs feel like they're like super expensive, right? Yeah. Right, and we would want or expect them to go back down to $4, right? And so you might hear like, oh, eggs have inflated at 100% rate or something like that, definitely. and it's like, oh, and then you might start hearing okay, the inflation rate on eggs has like come to zero, right? But then you go to the store and you're like, dude, these eggs are still $10 a dozen, right? Like, what's the deal here? I thought inflation was going down. Yeah. Now I'm still paying a ton for eggs, right? And so I think one of the important things to think about here is if eggs cost $10 a dozen and inflation's at 10%, What that means is the next year, eggs will now cost 10% more, so or $1 more. So $10 instead of $10 a dozen, they'll cost $11 a dozen. If inflation rate was say 5%, then instead of being $1 more, it'd be 50 cents more, right? 5% of $10 is 50 cents. So a year later, they would cost $10.50. If inflation rate was at like 10%, we said, oh man, that's super high. We get inflation, quote unquote, under control. We get it down to 2%. Well, what that still means, it doesn't mean that $10 eggs go back down to $4.
Right.
It means that now $10 eggs are only increasing at 2% per year. So by either be increasing by 20 cents approximately every year. So from $10 to $10.20. So if you hear something, I feel like you hear it with the housing market a lot, or just the market in general, and you'll hear like, oh, inflation's back under control, and then somebody will say, well, I don't think so, because when I go to the supermarket, the costs, it still costs me a fortune to buy my groceries, a lot more than it cost me last year. Well, yes, if inflation is still positive, it means prices are still going up, but maybe at a slower rate than they were, right? So if you wanted prices to actually go back down to what they were before, to go from, say, $10 a dozen down to $4 a dozen, you'd actually need what's called deflation. You would need effectively a negative percent return, right? So not a 2% inflation rate, not a 1%, not even a 0%. You'd need a negative rate, which would be called deflation. And I would tell you that that's probably not necessarily good for the overall economy.
Okay.
So when you see things that, when you see like price of some good going up, it's probably fair to assume the price of that good will be up for like ever. And when we talk about getting inflation under control, it's more about making sure it's now raising at a reasonable rate from that new standard. You could think of that new price as almost a new floor, and inflation will just continue to make it grow from there. But we want to make sure it's growing at a slower, more sustainable rate from there.
Sure. No, that makes a ton of sense to think about, because I've been guilty of that in the past, where
it's easy,
when you look at something, you're like, like oh my gosh, the inflation, like, car prices are so expensive, and you see these certain things. I know that like a couple of years ago, we were shopping for a new car, and we were like, oh my gosh, this is like the highest rate. This is inflated so much, blah, blah, blah. And then like you look at like what the inflation rate was then to now, and you go back to buy that car, you're like, well, it's more expensive than it was 2 years ago. Like, or it's like barely, but it's like, wait a minute, shouldn't this be going down? When is it going to go down?
Right,
and you're like,
when are we going to get back to the prices of yesterday?
Yeah, exactly. The prices of yesterday or last year or whatever. But to think about it in a term like that of like, yeah, it probably won't go back down. Maybe it just won't go up as fast, if you will. So I think that that's a big piece of like, when I found that, when that clicked in my head at a startlingly old age, I was like, oh, okay, cool. That at least helps for planning purposes, I suppose. We're probably not seeing $4 eggs again.
Right. And we really don't want, again, for all intents and purposes, we don't want to have deflation. So we don't want the cost of all of our goods to be declining, right? We want the idea of like increasing wages and all of that. And so, a small amount of inflation is healthy. We just don't want really super high inflation. But so if we sort of think about that, it would be like, okay, whatever something costs today, we would expect it to continue to increase in cost, tomorrow and the day after, but hopefully at a slow, reasonable rate.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I would say that the only thing that appears to be immune to inflation is the Costco hot dog and a soda deal.
Oh, yeah. I'd be curious what is it, $1?
$1.50.
$1.50?
Yeah.
I wonder how long it's been there.
It's been, I read an article the other day, it's been like that for like 30 years.
That's
something
awesome.
Like that. And there was
so they're probably losing money on
they're
definitely.
they're spending.
They're just proving a point.
Hundreds and hundreds of dollars, like there at the store. I mean, they're doing fine. They can get away with like selling a hot dog. They're probably still making a profit on that hot dog. If we're being honest, like a soda costs like 2 cents to make or something like that. But
right.
It's but I read this article a while ago about the CEO of Costco said like, hey, this will never go up. The price of like our hot dog and soda will never go up and such. And I was like, well, you can probably get away with that when the rest of your goods going up.
Yeah.
Everybody's just buying that on the way out after spending $1,000 or something like that.
That's funny. Yeah, I just Googled it. It says Costco's hot dog combo. It's been $1.50 since the 1980s.
1980s, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Hey, there you go. There's an exception to every rule.
Exactly.
Right?
That's
the Costco hot dog is inflation proof.
Yeah. So we should probably get sponsored by Costco. They have pretty good hot dogs. I was there last weekend actually, and they're pretty good. Yeah.
For $1.50, you can't beat it.
Exactly, especially on the way out. It makes you feel like a win.
Yeah.
Like after you just got gouged for a lot of things.
Yeah.
But cool, man. Well, that's all I really had on inflation. Hopefully that kind of at least sheds some light on when you see those numbers, I guess, or you hear on TV like inflation's at an all-time high or these certain things, like maybe take a step back and think about like what actually inflation is.
And hopefully you're not hearing that inflation's at an all-time high, because we're far from that.
That would yes, yeah. Hopefully we're not there, like by any means, but just kind of take that into consideration and take it with a grain of salt to like really take a step back on, maybe looking at month over month, year over year, whatever it might be, and just kind of have that financial knowledge of like what it actually is and what it might not be, I suppose, in the end.
Absolutely.
But awesome. Well, does everybody want to hang tight with us? We'll be right back on the other side of this.
And now, to put the personal in personal finance.
Welcome back to this side of the Fiscal Physical podcast. I am still here with Ryan Nelson, and I got a question here for you, Ryan. This is a fun one, I suppose. Would you rather explore space or the deep ocean?
Space.
All right. Any reason why? Like just
no, I don't know.
Been interested in space?
I just think it sounds more interesting. I mean, it's more like foreign,
Sure.
right? The ocean is like 4-hour drive away. Space is like really far.
Yeah. It's a little more than 4-hour drive.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know much about it. I think it just is like this, there's like this human desire for like flight, right?
Sure.
And then the Wilbur brothers put us on their backs there and helped us figure that out. And I don't know. I think like the idea of like space exploration is just interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
No, it's a good call. I think it was the Wright brothers, Wilbur and Orville.
What did I say?
The Wilbur brothers.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I do finance.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why you're not a pilot. Yeah. No, it's an interesting thing. I was like thinking about questions I could ask you, and this one popped up, and I was just like, yeah, that's an interesting question, because like I think the ocean is so vast, and like
it's crazy.
A few months ago, my wife and I went to Hawaii, and like you fly from the mainland over there, and it is like 5 or 6 hours just over ocean, and you're going like 500 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Like you look down, and they have all the apps, you can track your flight path and these things, and you're like, wow, there is a lot of space out there that is space. There's a lot of mass out there, area in the ocean that I'm just like, has anyone ever been in that spot like before? And like, how deep is it right there?
Right.
Like kind of thing. So I don't know. Like I feel like I would also choose space, because I think that's just kind of ingrained with me of like
Sure.
growing up. You're like, cool, like go into space and explore mankind, or one small leap for whatever, and one giant leap for mankind. You're kind of ingrained with that. But the more I thought about this question, I think the ocean would be pretty wild to do as well.
Yeah. What's like that stat is probably not even true, but something about like we've like explored more of the moon's surface than like the ocean.
Yes, there's something like that we've explored more area. Yeah, I don't know. And I was like, I always find that hard to believe, because like you're just driving in town and you can look up and see like the stars, and that's incredible. But like it's pretty hard to just look out and see the ocean unless you live there.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, that goes on for a while just overall. So
it is crazy.
But yeah, that's something to puzzle the listeners with. Would love to hear if you guys would enjoy or are more curious about exploring space or the ocean, and if so, why? Let us know. You can email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com, or just text us, send us a chat, whatever it might be. And that's all we got for you guys today. But Ryan, you got anything to wrap us up with?
As always, stay the course.
Thank you for joining us for the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Until next time, happy listening. And as always, stay the course. If you have a question or topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com. If you enjoyed today's discussion, subscribe to the podcast to ensure you never miss an episode. And consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite platform. This helps other listeners like you find the show. For more resources, you can visit Alchemy Wealth Management's website at www.alchemywealth.com, or find your Fiscal Physical, the book, on Amazon. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that personal finance is just that, personal. Please don't take anything we say as advice. The preceding content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not an offer or a solicitation, nor should it be construed or relied upon for tax, legal, or investment advice. It doesn't consider your personal financial situation or objectives and may not be suitable for you.